Sometimes, even just the introduction of a new idea to a community can have a huge and far-reaching impact. For some communities, the very idea of pluralism can create profound change. For others, change will only come about after sustained effort. So how do we begin to start putting our vision, knowledge, and skills into action? Let's use a case study to imagine how we might put bridge building across difference into practice.
In 2010, the popular Comedy Central show South Park received threatening messages after portraying the Prophet Muhammad on the show. As you may be aware, a dominant interpretation within Islam forbids any depictions of the Prophet Muhammad as idol worship. The show's depiction, which portrayed the Prophet in a bear costume, both as a half-hearted attempt to appease Muslims who would be insulted by any attempt to portray the Prophet's image, and simultaneously as a satire of this sensitivity, was then censored by the network, which chose not to make the episode available online following its air date. Molly Norris, a Seattle-based cartoonist, responded by creating a cartoon that made fun of the censorship and declared May 20, 2010, Everybody Draw Muhammad Day.
In 2010, student groups on several college campuses in the United States held their own Draw Muhammad Day as a show of solidarity with South Park and the exercise of free speech. One such campus was Northwestern University, where students from Secular Humanists for Inquiry and Free Thought, known as SHIFT, the campus's largest group of humanist, atheist, and non-religious students, chalked stick figures representing the Prophet Muhammad on sidewalks around campus. Members of the Muslim Cultural Student Association, known as MCSA, responded immediately in a letter to the student newspaper, indicating that while they fully supported free speech, they felt the SHIFT students had chosen to exercise theirs in a way that was hurtful to the Muslim community. They went on to say that they did not expect non-Muslim students to share their reverence for the Prophet, but they did expect their fellow students to show respect and consideration for their beliefs. Students from SHIFT had contacted the MCSA previous to the chalking, asking for a meeting to discuss their plans for the event, but for a number of reasons, that meeting never took place. Maybe if it had, the event would have gone forward differently. Then again, maybe it would not have made any difference at all. This is a classic dilemma for contemporary leaders. Unlike instances of religious bigotry or even violence, it represents the challenge of living in a diverse society where well-meaning people still come into conflict with each other. It's straightforward to condemn blatant bigotry when it arises, albeit all too frequently. It is much harder to discern how to mediate between groups who are neither motivated by ill will nor fear, but more profoundly by differing values and principles.
So let's put ourselves in this story. Imagine that you are a student leader at Northwestern involved in SHIFT. What recommendations could you make to the group? What knowledge would you need, and what skills might you deploy in order to create a situation in which students are able to effectively demonstrate their desires for free speech without ostracizing other members of your campus community? Because you have developed appreciative knowledge about Islam, you would know that depictions of the Prophet Muhammad, particularly offensive or disrespectful depictions, are highly insulting to Muslim students, and that both the portrayal on South Park and stick figure drawings would be seen as offensive and potentially hurtful. You might even be active in your campus interfaith group, and so you would be able to reach out to some of the Muslim students personally and ask for their take on the situation.
Now imagine that you are a student leader in the MCSA and you are tasked with responding to the chalking event. What knowledge would you need and what skills can you deploy in order to respectfully respond to actions you find deeply offensive? Or, upon hearing SHIFT's plans for the event, what might you suggest as a way to maintain the real purpose of the event, to promote free speech, in a way that your fellow Muslim students will not find harmful? Through your relationships with students of different perspectives, you might be able to organize a response from the student body that shows the hurt and harm is not exclusive to Muslims, but that students of all faiths and no faith want to see a campus where no community is targeted for humiliation and harm by others.
As a student leader in either role, you could use your skills in dialogue facilitation to host a conversation between SHIFT and the MCSA to discuss the goals of the event and how these goals might be accomplished without dismissing or disrespecting the values and beliefs of either group. Perhaps you could reach out to other groups on campus, such as Hillel or InterVarsity, to host an interfaith event in solidarity with free speech, demonstrating your shared values of freedom and mutual respect. Through this situation, you might forge new friendships and lasting partnerships, rather than creating a rift in the student community.
Now imagine you are a civics professor on campus with students from both SHIFT and MCSA in your class on civil liberties. What skills and knowledge would you need in order to address the situation in the confines of a weekly course? What examples could you draw from U.S. history that show people who disagree about some fundamental issues working together to promote their shared values of freedom and respect? How might you create a project or assignment for students in which they will be drawn to work together, despite their differing views and opinions on the idea of a Draw Muhammad Day?
It's important to note that there are no right answers to these questions, nor any correct resolution to the fundamental issues of this case study. Indeed, this is the challenge, and maybe the fun of interfaith work, that there are no easy answers. When setting out to be interfaith leaders, it's easy to think of single opportunities or events that would make an impact in your community. It's much harder to think about how we take the vision, knowledge, and skills of interfaith leadership and make them a regular part of our lives and our relationships with others. The most important thing you can do to begin synthesizing the vision, knowledge, and skills of interfaith leadership is to strive to live out the attributes of pluralism in your daily life. When you approach each encounter and conversation as a way to build relationships, find shared values, and foster cooperation, you begin to put your vision into practice organically. When situations like the campus chalking protest arise, you will be prepared to act and to demonstrate civic leadership for your community. Whenever you're faced with a difficult situation, it's important to remember your vision or your goal, which is to create and promote environments and cultures of pluralism. How you approach difficult issues is maybe even more important than what side you end up taking in any given disagreement. That is, if your ultimate goal is pluralism. Sometimes we become so focused on resolving specific problems in the moment that we lose sight of this higher goal. So how do we know what to pay attention to? To help us think about how we might do this, let's return to the interfaith triangle. When it comes to religious diversity, our knowledge, relationships, and attitudes impact one another. This means that the more appreciative knowledge we have about a group, the more likely we are to develop relationships with members of that group and have a positive attitude toward them. In contrast, if we have a negative attitude about a particular group, we are less likely to form relationships with them or to seek out any appreciative knowledge that might change our mind. This balance of influence is an essential piece of understanding the civic importance of interfaith leadership.
Imagine how the earlier campus scenario might play out differently if you had meaningful relationships with secular and Muslim students, or if you had a robust, appreciative knowledge of Islam. Now imagine how differently it might have turned out if the students involved had negative attitudes towards one another from the beginning, with a specific desire to hurt one another and no interest in working together toward a better solution. When faced with a problem or series of problems in your community, a focus on relationships and shared values is the best place to start looking for a solution.
Our vision is only useful when we share it with others who can help us make that vision a reality. Knowledge is only as good as our ability to use it to create the change we want to see, and our bridge-building skills benefit us only when we put them into practice.